What's up, everybody? Good late morning or early afternoon. I think we got to talk a little bit more about this one. I made a very short video yesterday about the Frank Clark signing with the Seahawks, but I haven't really said too much more other than the fact that, well, he's signed now, and given the Nwosu injury, it's pretty reasonable. So, um, first of all, since a lot of people asked, yes, obviously the other edge rusher video I made yesterday was recorded before the Frank Clark signing happened. I record some of my videos a day ahead of time, and sometimes a little tidbit of information will be incorrect because it's a little out of date. So yeah, that video was recorded. Now, some people were asking, why did you let the video go up, even though we had already signed Frank Clark before you uploaded the video, before you made the video go public? And here's the thing. Here's the thing, guys. Just because we signed Frank Clark doesn't mean this is a case closed. The book is not totally closed on this situation yet. And I think that even if I had known for a fact that Frank Clark was about to sign with the Seahawks, I still would have made that video about potential edge rusher trade targets because we are still in the trade window. The trade deadline is not here until Tuesday, and we've got one more game to play between now and that deadline. So I want to talk a little bit about Frank Clark in this video beyond just the fact that he's here now. And the general point that I'm going to try to get to here is I do think that Frank Clark is likely going to be an improvement over a guy like Levi Bell or Tyreek Smith just because of his experience and because last year he did prove he can still play a significant amount of snaps. Like he played, what was it, like 70% of the snaps for Kansas City's defense last year, something like that. And that does prove, at least on some level, that he's an NFL caliber player. Levi Bell and Tyreek Smith have not proven that yet. They've proven they can do good in the preseason. That's about it. Frank Clark, if you put him in that same situation that Levi Bell and Tyreek Smith were in, could probably do similar things. So I do think that it's an improvement on what we had. And at the very least, he does make us a little bit better. However, I don't harbor any illusions that we're getting Pro Bowl Frank Clark. Because if we're being honest, even though he did make the Pro Bowl a few times in Kansas City, I don't know if his actual level of play was up to that Pro Bowl standard. You could argue that even Kansas City, outside of the postseason, when Frank Clark typically started to really cook, if the Chiefs ever really got a Pro Bowl caliber edge in Frank Clark. So there's obviously going to be a lot of interest this weekend because Pete Carroll has said, Pete Carroll did specify this yesterday, he expects Frank Clark to play Sunday against the Browns. So we're signing him on a Wednesday, or I guess technically it could be Thursday because he didn't sign yesterday to my knowledge, and then we're expecting him to play on a Sunday. Now that's reasonable because he was playing for the Broncos just a few weeks ago. He has to at least be in game shape to a certain extent because he was playing for them. And he didn't play a lot, but the fact that he played at all indicates that he's at the very least capable. But there's another reason why I think it's kind of interesting and compelling that he's going to be playing on Sunday. So, Frank Clark, just to run things down real quick, is on the wrong side of 30, but barely. He's not that old yet. Guys like Carlos Dunlap and Melvin Ingram, Robert Quinn, they're all older than him. Frank Clark is still in he's at that age where you would still expect him to have something pretty good left for the NFL. And he has been reasonably productive over his tenure in Kansas City. He spent 4 years there, and obviously that first year was probably his best year. He had a really, really dominant stretch of football for the Kansas City Chiefs, and then he was really dominant in the playoffs. In fact, most postseason runs he was pretty dominant. But you take a look at the last 3 years he spent in Kansas City, he was just decent, 6 sacks, 4.5 sacks, 5 sacks. You take a look at the pressure numbers for these last 3 years, they're good. I mean, they're solid, but no season that he had in Kansas City even came close to his production as a pass rusher in 2018, his final year in Seattle. That year he had 13 sacks and 48 pressures. He never topped 30 QB pressures in any of his Kansas City seasons. So in 2018, the Seahawks actually got the best by far that Frank Clark has ever had to offer. Excuse me. So understand that even though Clark made the Pro Bowl a few times in Kansas City, he didn't make it in 2022. And you look at these numbers and you consider the fact that Frank Clark is also not a great run defender, you have to kind of question whether or not he really should have made those Pro Bowls. So you're not getting anything close to some dominant Pro Bowl caliber player. You're not even getting somebody who's on the same plane as Uchenna Nwosu is. Like, I know Nwosu was off to a little bit of a slow start this year, but he is, as of right now, a much better and much more capable player than Frank Clark. And I do think Frank Clark probably has a little something left in the tank, and I do think he can be pretty good, but Nwosu's just at a different level at this point in his career in comparison. Now, you also have to consider the context here. Frank Clark spent his entire career before this season in 4-3 defenses where he usually has his hand in the dirt. I was looking at some of his plays from Kansas City yesterday, and most of the time he starts the play with his hand in the dirt. There were some exceptions, but he is a defensive lineman. He is an edge rusher who is used to playing in that 4-3. Now, the Seahawks have a weird kind of defense where you have four down linemen and the edge rushers just stand up. It's kind of a combination of 3-4 and 4-3 principles in a way. But Frank Clark, bottom line, has very limited experience standing up. And I think that's part of the reason why his tenure in Denver only lasted a couple games before they let him go. He just wasn't really what they were looking for in terms of an outside linebacker who plays standing up all the time. They needed a 3-4 guy, and that's not Clark. Now, if you want to say, forget about that, there was a lot of stuff going on in Denver. Some of it had to do with him, but a lot of it didn't. They're bad, they're tanking, they just want to get rid of their veteran players. Okay, maybe. There's definitely other stuff going on in Denver beyond just Frank Clark as a player. But bottom line is, that Denver defense was atrocious when Clark was there, and he still barely got on the field. So I'm not looking at Frank Clark and saying this is our guy to replace Uchenna Nwosu. He is the definition of a guy who is there to help mitigate the loss a little bit in combination with potentially some other guys. You might see some Levi Bell. You might see some Tyreek Smith. You might even see a little bit of Draymond Jones playing on the edge. Who knows? So I'm not looking at this Frank Clark thing as something that closes the book on our issue on the edge. I'm looking at it as kind of throwing up a dart at the dartboard and hoping it lands in a good spot. And we've got this game on Sunday. Carroll has already said he expects Clark to play against the Browns. It would not shock me if this is going to be a little bit of a litmus test. Can this work with Frank Clark? Does Frank Clark fit this defense? Does Frank Clark have a pulse left after really not doing anything so far this year for Denver? Could this work at the very least on a scale to where Clark can give you maybe 15 snaps a game the rest of the year, or minimum be an injury replacement if somebody else gets hurt? And obviously, it's going to be a very small window of time, a very small sample size for us to try to figure this out. But it wouldn't shock me if the Seahawks are looking at this Browns game as a test for Clark to determine if they need to do anything else now. And obviously, there wouldn't be a lot of time left after this Browns game. You'd have less than 48 hours. But I wonder if they're going to use this game to see if Clark can play in this defense and play effectively. And if they don't like what they see, do they then go, we're going to try to get involved on the trade market with this guy or that guy, or try to get somebody with a little bit of a higher profile than a Frank Clark, or somebody who fits this defense better? Actually, earlier today in my Discord, a bunch of people were talking about this, trying to figure out how much does Frank Clark weigh at this point, because his PFR says 272. 272 is really heavy for a 3-4 outside linebacker. Most of our 3-4 outside linebackers are around like 250. So you look at something like this and you go, is he even... What is he going to be able to bring to the table in this defense at this position? Like, if he is 272, he's pretty close to the weight you would expect for a 3-4 down lineman. And there's another thing he's never done, but would he be more cut out for that than this? And honestly, we could use a little bit of help there too, so I'm not going to complain if he can do it. But the point is, if you're thinking about this guy as a Uchenna Nwosu injury mitigator, he's got to prove it. He's got to prove that he can play that position in this defense. So I'm definitely going to keep an eye on him this week. And to all the people who are wondering why that edge rusher trade video went up yesterday, it's because I still think it's in play. Just because you bring on Frank Clark doesn't mean the book is closed here. There is still a, I think, very real possibility that after this Browns game, we come up for air, look around, and realize if we want to contend for a Super Bowl this year, we got to get better. We got to go get the Chase Young. We got to go get the Montez Sweat. We got to go get the Josh Uche, etc., etc. So I stay tuned is what I'm trying to say here. Stay tuned. Frank Clark, last year he showed he has something pretty decent left, but it's definitely not anything on the level of Uchenna Nwosu. Bottom line, he's older. He's made a lot of money in his career. He's won 2 rings. I mean, he is as accomplished as almost any other defender in this league right now in terms of what he's done that you could put on an NFL player's bucket list. Production, playoff success, championships, money. Who knows? Some people are saying, like, maybe he'll do what Jarran Reed did and kind of revitalize his career. There were some other things going on with Jarran Reed that were extenuating that have allowed for this resurgence to happen. I don't know if I see that with Clark. It's possible it goes the other way, honestly. But we'll see what happens this weekend. See you guys later. Go Hawks.